Are your gluten-free holiday cookies coming out of the oven flat, crumbly, or just plain wrong? Stick around because today I'm revealing the top mistakes that you're making while you're gluten-free baking and how to fix them. Hi guys, it's Alicia Fall-Corton from Simply Gluten-Free Kitchen, your gluten-free bestie when it comes to all things tips, tricks, recipes, substitutions, and more. And today we're going to be talking about the mistakes that you're making while baking gluten-free. I get it. It is so incredibly frustrating. It took me years to perfect my gluten-free baking. So I want to share those mistakes and how to fix them with you today. Gluten-free baking mistake number one, only using a single gluten-free flour for your baking. This is going to ruin your texture. Now, I'm not talking about the gluten-free measure for measure flours. Those are actually a special blend of multiple different types of flours, which gives you the better outcome. But often people will just try to substitute one type of flour, let's say almond flour, coconut flour, brown rice flour. You can't just use one, unfortunately, in gluten-free baking. You need to have a combination of flours. So if you are going to just try to take one of your old recipes and make it gluten-free, go for a measure for measure flour. I linked to a couple of my favorites down in the description, but don't try to use just one flour, okay? And if you are searching for a specific gluten-free recipe, likely those recipes are either going to call for those one-for-one flours, or they're going to tell you the mixture of flours to use. That means that they have tested it in their own kitchens and it's going to turn out good. Gluten-free baking mistake number two, overmixing your dough. Gluten-free dough acts completely different than its gluten counterparts, and it will become ridiculously dense if you over mix it. Little story time. I remember the first gluten-free apple pie I ever made. I needed and overmixed that pie crust so bad that it was concrete. I mean, not even a strong chef knife could get through that thing. When we finally busted it open, it was like a piñata, and the insides were fantastic, but the outsides, yeah, concrete. So make sure you don't overmix your gluten-free dough, okay? Gluten-free baking mistake number three, not adding any binders. Gluten creates the binder in regular flour, and because that is our enemy, we need to replace it with something different. I tend to use a lot of psyllium husk, but you can also use xanthan gum. That is the more popular one, especially if you are getting a gluten-free measure for measure flour. Most of them are going to come with the xanthan gum, but you can buy it separate as well. Most of your recipes are going to tell you how much xanthan gum to add, and they will even remind you if you're using a gluten-free recipe that not to add any more if it's already in your measure for measure flour. But there is recipes that call for measure flour and xanthan gum. Make sure you add it in that case if it is not telling you otherwise, because that means that the creator of the recipe knew that it needed just a little bit more binding to get the structure and the texture that you want. Gluten-free baking mistake number four, using too much of the ingredients. This is especially true with all of your dry ingredients. When I was baking regular gluten baking almost a decade ago, I never used a kitchen scale. I just wung it with my measuring cups and all of that, and it seemed to work out just fine. But now that I'm working with gluten free, I've really turned to using a kitchen scale, my favorite one down in the description, but it just makes such a difference. Every time you're using a cup, if you're putting any extra pressure or you shake it or you push really hard, you're going to get way more than what likely the recipe wants. Now, if the recipe doesn't come in a grams conversion or an ounces conversion, then you just go with the cups. The recipe maker obviously thought that it wouldn't make that huge of a difference. But if that recipe, and a lot of gluten-free ones do, come with grams, use it. It'll, one, you don't have as many dishes because you're not using as many measuring cups. And two, the results are going to be better. You're going to have a better flavor. A second right here to pause, and I'm super curious to know if you have made any of the mistakes that I've mentioned so far. Let us know in the comments. There's no shame. Or if there's one that I haven't mentioned yet and you would be dying to know what the solution was, pop it down in there. I betcha the gluten-free community will come out and help, and I will try, of course, to help as well. So let me know down in the comments. Gluten-free baking mistake number 5: you don't give the dough time to rest. Like that, probably longer. Gluten-free dough especially needs time to rest. What is it doing while it's resting? It's hydrating. Gluten-free flours tend to love to absorb more liquid than their gluten counterparts. So giving it a few minutes to let it rest and get hydrated is going to help you a ton. Even if the recipe does not say to let it rest, I still let my dough rest for at least 5 to 10 minutes. Unless it states to put it in the fridge for an hour or 30 minutes, I still give it 5 or 10 minutes. I check my hydration level. If it is still crumbly and completely falling apart, it either needs to rest for a little bit longer or you need to add a little bit more liquid. This jumps us right into gluten-free baking mistake number 6: not using enough liquids. Like I said before, if you are letting that dough rest and it is just incredibly crumbly and falling apart, you need to add a little bit more of whatever liquid the recipe is calling for, whether that's water or butter, oil, milk. Just when you're going to add a little more, tiny bits at a time, okay? Those flours just love to absorb so much liquid that if you were to overhydrate it, then you wouldn't want to add more flour. Then all your ratios are messed up with the binders and it just turns into a big hot mess. So if you are needing to add a little bit more liquid, do it in tiny little portions at a time. Gluten-free baking mistake number 7: using old and expired ingredients. And really, this one can go for regular gluten baking too. If you're using super old baking powder, baking soda, they are not going to work the same way from when they were in their youthful, younger, not expired times, okay? So those are the two big ones. You shouldn't be using expired, well, anything, but especially make sure that your baking powder and your baking soda are not expired. Last but not least, gluten-free baking mistake number 8 is not testing the recipe at least one time before all of your events. Just today, I was trying a new sourdough recipe and they turned out dense and just not good. So you have to give yourself the time to test out that recipe. Are you and your family really going to be sad if you have to eat some extra or maybe not perfect to get it right? No, mine never complains. They love being recipe testers. So make sure you try it at least once. As much as those amazing gluten-free bakers who create these recipes do at testing in their own kitchens, it still varies. Every oven is different, every house's temperature, humidity, it's all going to be different. So I really suggest that you give the recipe a try before the big event that you are making it for, and write yourself some notes. Say, I needed to add this little bit of liquid. I needed to cook it a little longer. It had to rest for 10 minutes. Write those little notes to yourself so you don't have to keep testing, kind of like I had to do, and why it took me probably 6 years to finally figure out how to do gluten-free baking. So take it from me. write your notes, and test the recipes. You have just heard the top 5 gluten-free baking mistakes and how to fix them. So now you can get on out there and become a gluten-free baking pro. I know you have it in you. If you are just ready to go and you want to make some holiday treats, make sure to check that description box for my 12 favorite gluten-free Christmas cookies PDF. It comes with all the recipes, some extra tips and tricks, and it's going to get you into that kitchen, and your family is going to be wowed by how amazing your holiday cookies turn out this year. And if you found this super helpful, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more of my holiday baking videos. And, share it with a gluten-free friend. If you're like, no, I want nothing to do with baking, but I still sat here and listened to you for however long this video is, but you do know a baker that could potentially benefit from this, shoot it over to them. All right, till next time.